Okay, hi everyone, Professor Sebastian. Welcome back to our statistics class notes. We are starting in here on section 5.3 on page 66. Okay, and we are talking here about associations and categorical variables. So we just got done learning different rules for probabilities on how to compute probabilities involving and, probabilities involving or. We learned a multiplication rule for independent events. Probability of A and B is probability of A times probability of B as long as A and B are independent. Means that knowledge of one does not give us any information about the probability of the other. But now we want to talk about how can we tell if there's an association between categorical variables. So we got to learn about another kind of probability called conditional probabilities, and then we got to learn if the events are dependent or independent based on these conditional probabilities. So at this point I had only talked about events are independent if knowledge of one, knowing the knowledge of one occurring does not tell us that anything about the probability of the other occurring. So we're going to actually learn how probabilities can actually give us a better idea of whether events are dependent or independent. Okay, so here we have a table, a two-way table or a contingency table, whatever terminology we're using for it, but sometimes it's called a two-way table, sometimes it's called a contingency table. And basically we have a survey of 406 people where we found out what their education level was, whether they have less than a high school education, high school only, or college or higher, and then what their income level is, whether it's low income, average income, or high income. So what we want to know is, hey, is there an association between highest education level and income category? In other words, are the proportions of average income different for various levels of education? So for example, are college educated more or less likely to be high income earners than high school educated, etc.? These are kinds of questions we're interested in. Is there an association between your level of education and the income that you make? So the way we're actually going to be able to determine that is through something called conditional probabilities. So conditional probabilities are probabilities where we focus on just one group and imagine taking a random sample from that group alone. Okay, that's what a conditional probability is. So we're going to do that for this example in this two-way table here. Now the key words that you look for when somebody's telling you whether you want to find a conditional probability is the words given that. So let's say we want the probability that the person is high income given that the person is college educated. That is not and, is not or. So this is these are another type of keywords we're looking for. Probably a person is high income given that the person is college educated. That tells us focus in only on the college educated people in our survey and see what percentage or what proportion of them are high income. So if you go back up to the table, if you look at the college educated group, which is just this column, college or higher, and we look at how many of them are high income, so it's 77 high income people in the college educated group, which has 181. We don't look at the whole 406. We only look at the 181 that are in the college educated group. So 77 out of 181 is the probability that a person is high income given that, in other words, given that we know the person is college educated. So that's equal to 0.425, 77 out of 181 or 42.5%. So let's say we want the probability that the person is low income given that the person is high school only. In other words, has a high school education only. So that means focus in on the high school educated group only. So the high school only group is this group. So there's only 110 people we're focusing in on, and the low income people in that group were 58. So 58 out of 110 because we focus in on the high school only. 58 out of 110 is 0.527 or 52.7%. And then also, let's say we want the probability that the person's less than a high school education, given that the person is high income. So that means focus in on the high income group only and look for those that are less than high school educated. So we focus in on this high income group, which is now this row. We look for those that are low. We look for those that are less than high school educated. So that's this column. So the less than high school educated out of the high income is 12. 12 out of the 109 people in that group. So 12 out of 109 is 0.110 or 11%.